church. Welcome back into the PHBC Pastors Podcast. As always, so glad you've joined us this week. Gib has some sinus and some congestion stuff, so he is out this week as he sounds, in his own words, like a frog. I didn't say that. He said that. So anyway, it's me and Andrew today. We're excited to continue to walk through these churches in Revelation with you. And again, if you haven't, stop and go listen to Gib's sermons on these. This is kind of supposed to be a follow-up on what he's already done, the work he did. And then I think number two, what we always want to do in these podcasts is kind of have a lengthier discussion about some of the points that are made in these chapters and in these passages. That's really hard to do on a Sunday morning. It's really hard to do, in that time frame. And so it gives us a chance to do that. As always, if you've got a question, we'd love to answer that question. And so email us, drop us a line on Facebook, whatever you want to do. And we promise we'll get back to you. If we don't do it on here, we'll definitely email you. But that's the purpose of these. We really want this to be kind of a long-form discussion about the things of the Lord and maybe a chance to dig in on some details. You can't spend 30 minutes in a sermon digging into a specific detail, because then it would be an hour and then everyone would get mad.
That's okay.
Yeah, but we can do that here because people are choosing to listen to it. Yeah. So as always, we're going to open just by reading the first half of it. This is the church at Philadelphia. We've got this, and then we've got Laodicea next week, which is, of course, the church that probably most people have heard of. So we've got the church of Philadelphia this week, Laodicea next week, and then we've got some new things coming up that we're going to try, and so we're excited about that. But let's get into it. So this is Revelation chapter 3, and this is verses 7 and 8. It says, "To the angel of the church in Philadelphia write, the words of the Holy One, the true One, who has the key of David, who opens and no one will shut, who shuts and no one opens." So as always, he starts with an introduction of who he is. It's a little different for each church, depending upon how he wants to introduce himself. And then he says in verse 8, "I know your works," which again, this is the exact same way he starts the letter in Sardis. "I know your works. Behold, I have set before you an open door, which no one is able to shut. I know that you have but little power, and yet you have kept my word and have not denied my name." So unlike last week, we're greeted with a church that really has no reputation. Where Sardis had a great reputation but was dead, this church seems to have no reputation. In fact, Jesus tells them, hey, you have little power. So he doesn't mince words. Mm-hmm. He doesn't kind of do the whole hey, man, you're doing all right. Don't you worry about it. He just tells them, man, you have little power. But he tells them some encouraging things too. So what do you think? What do you think about the little power? What's the point of him being so specific about that, maybe?
Yeah, you read verse 8, and that's what he explains. And the second half of verse 8, I think, is super key. And he lists two things that just, I think what Christ is commending about this church is their reliance on him solely, right? And he goes into detail about, or not detail, but he just explains that, hey, you don't deny my name and you keep my word. Yeah. And so, I don't know, as I was reading that, those two things, those were just 6 words, how big of a deal that is.
Yeah.
Right? As I've been reading the Old Testament, God hates it when his people don't keep his name and don't abide in his word, and so that's such a big deal. And I don't know, I think the part of, Jesus explained their little power.
Yeah.
Obviously it doesn't tell us what kind of jobs or influences or income or status these Christians have, but I think what's key is it really does show man, you have trusted me along the way, and obviously with the culture that this church would have been in, it would have been costly to follow Jesus, right? That's kind of the whole point of this era of this Revelation book. It's are you going to follow Jesus, or are you going to follow the world? And so with the statement in verse 8, it seemed, and we'll get into it more later, but they have made a choice to follow Jesus. They've made a choice to not deny him. They made a choice to keep his word.
Yeah.
And it's cool, and we'll get into it later. It's God loves that.
Yeah.
And it just seems, reading the Old Testament, like you see like the big deal that God has when his people reject his command and his word. And so it's just, I don't know, it's such a simple verse, but it's cool because it's like, God's like, this is what you should be doing.
Yeah.
Right? You should be relying on me. You should be, the fruit of your life should be one that tells of your love for my name and your love for my word. And so I think that's really challenging. And so I've asked myself the question, man, am I more concerned about God's name? Am I more concerned about God's word than really anything else, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or am I more concerned about his word and his name rather than what's going to be the most comforting thing for me right now? Or what's going to be, the thing that's going to give me the most reputation, right? Or the thing that's going to benefit me the most. I don't know, it's just, I think you see like the cost in this verse for following Jesus.
Yeah. I know we were talking before about how this is such a hard thing to kind of impose or superimpose onto our situation. Almost every time in my life that I've quote unquote taken a stand and done what I believe God was calling me to do, very rarely was it met with any opposition. Usually it's encouraged. People are encouraging me to do those things. And when I decided to go and really felt called into ministry, that wasn't like, what an idiot. Like, why would you do that? Most people were encouraging and they really saw it as an honorable thing. And I think we are kind of lost on this idea that the people that are receiving this letter, it's the exact opposite. Anytime they make any stand, any money they give to the church, any time they give to the church, any time that they say that Jesus is Lord, culture looks at them and thinks, man, what a bunch of idiots.
Right.
They just don't get it. In fact, we would rather them not be here. Like, they're the problem. If we could get rid of people like that, it would really help. Whereas, I grew up in East Texas, it's the exact opposite. Like, we want more people. We want more people like this. So I think, number one, it's good to keep that in mind, that we really don't have a whole lot of personal experience with that. Now, some people might. Some people obviously didn't grow up here, or maybe listen to this and it's a different situation for them. And that's true even in America. I'm not saying that's not true. You don't have to go to China to get treated that way for your faith. And certainly there's some kids, maybe the closest thing we have right now is some of the kids that are in high school that take a stand for Christ. Like, they probably catch more flack for it than I would. Just because of the situation they're in and some of the things they're going through. And I certainly didn't do a great job with that when I was in high school. So, I think when I think of that first, it's like, man, what does it mean to have little power? My first thought is I really don't know what that's like in terms of my Christianity. But then number two, I think the idea of like, what is power? Like, when he says you have little power, what does that mean? Mm-hmm. Does that mean money? Does that mean stuff? Does that mean stature? Does that mean influence? Because I don't think the Bible has an aversion to power. I don't think that's the issue. We were talking earlier, this is a verse in Hebrews. If you've read Hebrews 11, it's kind of what they call the Hall of Faith. He brings up all these people that are faithful. And he's getting ready to finish this. And he says in verse 32 of chapter 11 of Hebrews, "What more shall I say? For time would fail me to tell of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, David, and Samuel and the prophets, who through faith conquered kingdoms, enforced justice, obtained promises, stopped the mouths of lions, quenched the power of fire, escaped the edge of the sword." So all of these things that he's saying, like, those are powerful things. Those aren't weak things. You don't do those things because you're weak. But he says they were made strong out of weakness. They became mighty in war. They put foreign enemies to flight. And so I think there's a tendency to think, well, I've got to be weaker. That's how I do this. If I'm going to be a Christian, I've got to figure out how to make myself weak. And I don't know that that's necessarily what Jesus is saying. I think Jesus is more saying what he says in Sermon on the Mount, where he says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit." There's this spirit about you that says, regardless of what I have, if I don't have Christ, I really don't have anything. And I think that's what he's saying in Hebrews 11 is all of these people are accomplishing something and they're doing these mighty things. But the reason they're able to do them and the reason they're mentioned in this faithful category is not because of what they did or what they had or what they accomplished. The reason they're faithful is because they were weak. They knew themselves to be weak men and weak women who needed God. They needed Him. They had to depend on Him. One of my favorite quotes by, and it's attributed to R.C. Sproul. I don't know if he heard it somewhere else. But it's the best of men are men at best. And I think that is the core of what Jesus is getting at.
Right.
We're weak. If you're listening to this and you have $10 billion in the bank, probably no one is, but
hit me up.
Yeah, hit me up. $10 billion. What's a million amongst friends at that point? But if you're listening and you're the king of a nation, and if you're listening and you are a general and you're able to put foreign enemies to flight, like Jesus says, none of those things make you strong. Those are not indicative of necessarily strong people in the Christian worldview. The Christian worldview is we are completely and wholly dependent upon who Christ is, what He's accomplished for us, what God can do. And like you said, in the Old Testament, it's just example after example of people who are incredibly weak in spirit that say, I can't do this. I can't do this without you. And God provides, and then God provides, and then it's an example of incredibly sinful, or how incredibly sinful humans can be to say, well, that must have been something that I did. I must have accomplished those things. And so anyway, I think that's a good point.
Yeah, I think it really draws back on the idea of like, what's my identity here?
Yeah,
right? Because it's like you said, there's no inherently like big issue. Like there's no issue with like being a boss or being a CEO or having like a big family or like those sorts of things. Right?
To that you say praise God. Yeah, praise God that you
yeah. But what it boils down to is like, what is your identity? Because the temptation, right? Like the temptation is like, well, I am in charge. Well, I do have a lot of that fill in the blank. I do.
Yeah.
I can spend all my time here. So it's like, I think what Jesus is saying here is that this church is really like attempting to put their identity in Christ.
Right.
And that's why they have little power. Right. They're effortlessly saying like, you know what? I do this, or my I'm all about this, or I've been working this job for whatever. There's tons of different examples, but all in the attempt of saying like, my old identity is dead, and I'm attempting to take up my cross every day and deny myself. And so, and if you do that, right, the fruit of your life will, the example of it will be one of like, well, like I'm not going to deny His name because I'm His, or I'm going to abide in His word because I'm His. Like like He's the one that's given me this new life, and so.
Well, and you mentioned this before we started, but that the tendency, especially for churches even today, is not to so much deny His name as it is to like seek power in the wrong way and use His name to do it. We're gonna be Jesus people. We're about Jesus, but we're gonna define Him kind of the way we need to.
Yeah.
We're gonna kind of bend our knee to some of these things that the world is putting pressure on us for, so that we can reach them. And it's like Jesus comes along and He's like, "Hey, that's not how this works. Right? I'm the one that draws people unto myself. Like I'm the one that's meek and lowly. Like I want people to come to me. You don't bend your knee to the world so that you can reach people for Christ.
Right.
You stand up for Christ so that people will be attracted to Him." I didn't mean to cut you off, but I think when you made that point, I thought that was really important to say that it's so. Say it this way. I mean, it's so tempting, kind of like the church in Sardis, to say we can be Jesus people and still have a really good reputation with the world. And again, this line is even more blurred where we live, because you really can be Jesus people and have a good reputation here. But it was impossible for them. Like there was no way you could stand firm in the things of God, and for the world around you to go, man, we're really excited about that. Not to say that it's non-existent now, but
Yeah. Well, and I think in a way, it almost makes it more difficult.
Yes.
To say, all right, well, what really is my identity, right? Like, am I really this person that's not going to deny his name or stand in his word, or stay in his word, or am I just going to take on the identity of just being this nominal, like, Christian or however my society defines it? Like you said, the line's a little bit blurred, and to me, that's kind of alarming.
I think it can be, and I think being faithful in little things says a lot about what you would do with the big things. I mean, Jesus makes that pretty clear that what you do with the little things you have is a really good indicator of what you're going to do with bigger things. And so, if you want to know whether or not you would stand up to persecution in the church, what does your Monday look like?
That's a good point.
Like what is that's something that I think has really challenged me in the last 3 or 4 years, especially as whatever, all of the different things that have happened in the last 3 or 4 years, whether it be, political things or the abortion issue or all the LGBTQ things, all of those things, you start to wonder, like, well, what would I do if somebody held a gun to my head? Well, we always go to the most, like, extreme thing, what would I do if somebody said they were going to take everything away from me? And I think it's an easier question to say, what am I going to do if my neighbor asks me about that? What am I going to do when, some kid I'm discipling wants me to speak into that? Am I willing to take a stand at that table at Starbucks? Am I willing to take a stand in my driveway and say, man, I believe in the word of the Lord, not in a mean way, not in a, those people out there, they don't get, like, not about that, but just to say, like, man, I stand on the word of the Lord. I claim Christ. And I think if you're not willing to do that, then you can go ahead and just don't worry about what's going to happen if someone puts a gun to your head, or, everybody wants to be a hero,
right?
But you don't get accolades for the driveway or Starbucks table or whatever it is.
Or even just in your personal time with the Lord.
That's
right?
True.
Like, I think it even starts right there. It's like, if you like do not seek Christ, then what makes you think like you were saying, like, using that example? So I don't know.
Yeah.
Thinking about.
Well, let's get into it. So we talked about how the church is weak, and I know you've hit on a few of these promises. We wanted to look at a couple of things that what does God promise to this weak church? What does Christ say? Hey, you're a weak church, but let me just read that one more time so we make sure we're on the same page. It says, you have little power, and yet you have kept my word and have not denied my name. Well, this is what he says in verse 9. It says, behold, I will make those of the synagogue of Satan who say that they are Jews and are not, but lie. Behold, I will make them come and bow down before your feet, and they will learn that I have loved you. Because you have kept my word about patient endurance, I will keep you from the hour of trial that is coming to the whole world, to try those who dwell on the earth. I am coming soon. Hold fast what you have so that no one may seize your crown. The one who conquers I will make a pillar in the temple of my God. Never shall he go out of it. And I will write on him the name of my God and the name of the city of my God, the new Jerusalem, which comes down from my God out of heaven, and my own name. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. So he gives them some things that he's going to promise to them. Hey, if you continue down this path of holding fast and of trusting me and of keeping my word, what are some things that are going to happen? So what are some of those that maybe kind of stuck out to you? I know we could spend 3 hours talking about all of them, but let's kind of...
Yeah, the one that really drew my attention in verse 10 and 11, he in verse 11 says, I am coming soon. Hold fast what you have so no one will seize your crown. And so, he's like, in verse 10, he again commends them, hey, you've kept my word, right? It was about patient endurance. And so I think he furthers that example in verse 11, talking about holding fast, because again, he's aware of their faith. He's aware of their love and their identity in him and in Jesus. And so he encourages them to continue in their faith, to just keep trying, right? To keep growing near, to keep getting close to him, because he's already laid that out, right? They're not finding their identity or power in what they do or what they're accomplishing or what they're building. Their identity and their love is just Jesus. Like they've made their church of Philadelphia like all about Jesus. So what does Jesus tell them to do? Keep doing that.
Yeah.
Keep making everything about me. And
which is nice. He doesn't give them something to do.
Right.
It's not like, I'm glad you're doing that, but
like you need to go talk to all these people or do all these programs or do all these things. And so like I think again, like man, that is like encouraging for us, right? As a church. Like what's the most important thing we can do right now? Get closer to God. like it sounds silly, but like I think that's what he's like explaining to them is whatever the future holds for this church, whatever economic or national or whatever things may come their way, Jesus' encouragement and challenge is like, hey, get closer to me. And so reading this verse, I've asked myself the question of like, man, how do I hold fast to Jesus? And just reflecting on, man, like, how am I abiding in his word and how am I abiding in his name and how am I like practicing my faith? Like, how am I trying to know him and to be close to him? And so I just think that's an interesting, like an interesting thing that I think we miss a lot, because it's like, in order that no one may seize their crown, in order that they will not be made distant from him, or I don't know how to really put that. Like his only like challenge and encouragement for them is, hey, get closer to me. Yeah. So it's like, is that my mindset? Like when my life, when I feel like, I don't know, I'm struggling or whatever, like environmental things or circumstantial things that are happening to me, is my first reaction like, man, I need to get closer to God? Or is it, I need to like get in there and like fix it, do it myself, or like even do we view church that way? Like, whenever opportunities come or failures might be on the next corner, like as our response, man, like I just want to be closer to Jesus. Like us as a church, like our goal is to get closer to God. Yeah. I don't know. I think that's such an easy thing to overlook, because a lot of times our eyes are fixed on the wrong thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we make such big deals out of things, like you said, that don't really matter. I think one of the big things, I know we've talked about this a lot, just me and you, was unity. The church doesn't spend a whole lot of time trying to figure out what does actual unity look like. And we spend a lot of time trying to figure out, well, what can we all do that we all agree on? And it's like, man, that list gets short. Well, everybody can agree on Fall Fest. We all want people to get saved. We like candy. It's like everybody can agree on, some program or whatever. Yeah. But when it comes to really getting to know one another, really digging down into who you are, who am I, what makes us us, and even though we're both redeemed by Christ, we've been bought by him, that should identify us. That should be what I identify you as, and vice versa. So many times it becomes exactly what he's saying it shouldn't become, right? Whereas we should look at each other and go, man, no matter what we have, we're so weak, and Christ has been so good. We tend to look around and go, I wonder if they kind of spend their money like I spend my money. Do you think they vote the way that I vote? Do you think that they kind of do the things I would do? Do they dress like I would dress? Do they talk like I would talk? Do they handle their business the way I would handle my business? What do they do with their kids? We start asking those questions instead of, man, how can I help them hold fast to Christ? Yeah. How can I help them know Christ better? How can I help them see that, hey, man, the world is putting these pressures on you, and God has told us, man, hold fast to him and his word. How can I better foster that? Like you said, so much of the conversation in churches can become, how can we make this easier? Yeah. How can we make this the most least obtrusive, the least easiest entry point in the world? And yet Jesus comes along, he's like, man, there ain't nothing easy about holding fast to my name and holding fast to my word. that's what you need each other for.
Yeah.
So,
and you notice, like, he says, hold fast to what you have, which is being close to God, like abiding in His Word, and clinging to His name. He doesn't say anything else that's going to help you. To nothing else is going to protect you from them seizing your crown. Right? There's not enough protection you can have. If it's not Jesus, then you're defenseless.
Right.
And so, I think and we kind of brought it up earlier, in terms of persecution and the ease that we have, definitely regionally where we are as a church. I think that is a fear that we have, because it's maybe it's just our assumption or whatever about each other's faith, but if Jesus says, hey, holding fast to me is your only protection, there should be a sense of urgency for us to bring that to each other as a church. To say, hey, man, knowing God and being close to Him is the only thing that's going to protect you day in, day out, right?
Yeah.
Knowing Him, not saying that knowing Him is going to make your life better, because that's not true. In terms of emotions and just circumstances, that's not what that means. But in terms of, man, as Satan tries to wage war on your life, the only thing that's going to protect you and strengthen you every day is being close to God.
Right.
And I do not think that way all the time. I think of every other thing to tell someone to make them happy rather than, hey, you should get closer to God.
Yeah.
That's not my go-to, and it should be.
Yeah.
So there's a confession.
Yeah. Well, one thing I wanted to hit on before we get done, I know we're running out of time, but he starts this with he introduced himself as the words of the Holy One. That's verse 7. The true one, who has the key of David, who opens and no one will shut, who shuts and no one opens. And then the very next verse, he talks again about doors. He says, I've set before you an open door which no one is able to shut. And so, Sandra, I got curious as what's that mean? Because you hear about doors, you hear about him knocking on doors. What is he going after? Well, in Isaiah 22, you get where the imagery comes from. And so there's basically this story. We won't read the whole thing, but there's a guy by the name of Shebna who is in David's court, and he holds the keys basically to David's city. And so the key is not like a key, right? It's like this massive wooden thing that you would carry around on your shoulder or on your back, because they got to pry open these massive locks and things like that. And so this guy is he's evil, and he is not doing the things that God wants him to do. So there's a prophecy that he's going to be removed, and Eliakim is going to be a new guy that comes in to hold these keys. And so this is what it says in Isaiah 22. So it's easy to remember. It says, and I will place on his shoulder, that's Eliakim, the new guy, the key of the house of David. And so again, you read here, it says, this is the one who has the key of the house of David in Revelation. Well, this is a shadow, if you will, or a version of that. He says, he shall open and none shall shut. He shall shut and none shall open. So there was this actual person in David's court that had this key. And that God, when he gave him this key, said, hey, when he opens a door, no one gets to shut it. And when he shuts a door, no one gets to open it. He's the only one with a key. Now, David doesn't have it. Nobody, he has this key. And then Jesus comes, Church of Philadelphia, and he says, hey, I'm the Holy One, the true one, who has the key of David, who opens and no one will shut, who shuts and no one opens. Now, obviously, this isn't a physical city. This isn't the physical thing, but this is the culmination of what Jesus is. Whereas in Isaiah, it's just a shadow of things to come. This is the culmination of that. Jesus says, hey, I'm the one who holds the key to the city of God. I'm the one who's able to open doors that no one can shut. I'm the one who's able to shut doors that no one can open. And the first thing he says to them is, behold, I've set a door before you, an open door before you, which no one is able to shut. And it's like before he even tells them that they have little power, before he even tells them that, he knows it's not easy for them, he wants them to know, I've opened a door for you that no one can shut. Literally no one is able to do that. Not the people around you, not the world, not the authorities, and not you. Your own sins aren't able to shut this door. And I think that was so powerful to me when I read it. Just the idea that, hey, no one is strong enough to close the door of salvation that Jesus opens for you. If you're a child of God and you're seeking him out and you want to abide in him and his word, that there's good news for you. And that Jesus is saying, man, if you're that person, the door is always open. And nobody can shut that door because he's the only one that has the key. No one else has a key. Yeah. He's the one that has the key. And so, we've talked about, people that we've discipled, especially some younger guys that I know you're discipling, that we both have experience with people that are going, man, I really do want to know. I really do want to know the Lord. I really do want to keep his word, but I'm just struggling. All right, like I'm just having the hardest time. And maybe, you're listening to this podcast and you're thinking that too. Like, I get it. I'm the weak people. I know I'm weak. I know that I am not a strong person, and that, maybe it's even physically, like, I got my knees ache and my bones ache, and all this weather going back and forth is killing my knees. And it's just a reminder every morning when I wake up, like, man, not very strong today. But for most of us, that's more of a spiritual thing. It's man, I'm so weak spiritually. I know all of these things I should be doing. I know I need to be doing more of these things, but I'm just weak, and I sense that. I think there's such an encouragement that Jesus begins this letter to them before he even tells them who they are, to remind them, like, hey, I'm the one that holds the keys to your salvation, and I've opened that door for you, and no one's able to close that door. So despite all of these struggles and the fact that you don't have much power, that you're weak, and that you're not, in a strong place, that you don't have a whole lot going for you, the first thing you need to know is that that's okay.
Yeah.
That is okay.
Yeah.
What's not okay is some of these other things we've seen. Like, you got a really good reputation, but you're dead. Right. That was last week. You got some things going for you, but you're allowing false teachers in your church. You're allowing people to teach things that aren't of the word of the Lord. You're allowing people to, worship false gods or whatever that is. Jesus says to them, you're holding fast, and that's all that matters. Like you said, that is all that matters. And because of that, man, there's a door open to you that no one can close. I think that was really encouraging to me, because I think as you look forward into the future, I think that's going to become more of a reality for more Christians, where they're going to feel less and less like, man, everybody's just on my team about this thing.
Yeah.
I know you probably see that a lot in student ministry. Like, these kids are not met with a lot of acceptance when they really try and take a stand for Christ. And that's only going to get worse. It wasn't, I was in high school 14, 15 years ago, and we got out early for church days. We didn't have practice on Wednesdays. If we did, we got out at 4 so we could go to church. It's just not the reality anymore.
Yeah.
Things are changing, and I think the natural response to that is to be like, well, things shouldn't change, and we want to go back the way it was. And it's like, man, that's not what Jesus is telling you. Yeah. Jesus is telling you, don't worry about that.
Right.
You get close to me.
Yeah.
Right. You commit to me and my word. I'll take care of the rest of it. You may not ever be a strong church again. Doesn't matter. Yeah. That's not the issue. So anyway, even the imagery he comes and closes with, that he's going to make them a pillar in the temple, that he will never cast them out of it, that he's going to give them a new name in a new city. Kind of going back to our first point, it's like, God's not against you being in authority. He's not against you being first. He's not against you living forever. Mm-hmm. He's very much against the way in which you can go about that.
Yeah.
He's promising these people, I'm going to do it. I'm going to make you a pillar. You're weak right now. One day you're going to be a pillar. Your reputation may not be good right now, but I'm going to give you a new name one day. And that day's coming. And your job is not to try and make a name for yourself, to make yourself into a pillar, to try and accrue power, to try and accrue influence. Your job is to hold fast to me and my word.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good way to kind of sum it up, just in terms of like, okay, like right now, like with my life, how can I like be a child of God, right? Yeah. How can I like attempt this like faith thing, mm-hmm. like you're mentioning, like some of the guys like I'm discipling now, it's like the desire is there, and mm-hmm. so it's like, well, then from there we just attempt, right? Like when Jesus calls us to like take up our cross and deny ourselves, like we try to do that.
Yeah.
Right. Like we just try.
Yeah.
Like because the reason we try is because we love him and because who he is and what he's done for us. You know. So I don't know. Like it's like you never see in here like about their like performance, right? Like he didn't say like, well, you kept my name for 3 days, but then on Wednesday you forgot it, and now I hate you. Like that's not what he's saying.
Yeah.
But it's like this. I don't know. Like it's just this. It's like this attitude and this like belief and this trust of like I'm gonna keep his name. Like I'm gonna try to like keep his word, like stay in his word. You know, because he promised me. Because he promised that he loves me and that he's open this door for me and that he has a future with him, like for me, you know. It's like I don't know, like I just again I know like every place in the world is different, like in terms of like cost, right? It might cost you more in one place to follow Jesus than another, but like is it costing you something? Like when you boil down to it, like have you chosen a side? Like are you on board and on the team like for Christ? Like are you a child of God? And so I think that comes way before holding fast and being patient and enduring things. Like are you his, right? Have you decided to follow him? Like I don't know, I think about that because, I mean, that's what he wants from us. You know, he doesn't want our cheap imitation. He doesn't want, I mean, like next week we'll get more into it, like lukewarmness, you know, like he wants us to just simply follow him. And like, I don't know, I think verse 8 is just really cool because it's so simple, you know, and it's like, that's what, like, God is stoked about that. God is stoked about them keeping his word and not denying his name, you know? So I think that speaks into our identity. So it's like, is that us? Is that you? Is that something I'm trying more to center my life around and not just a bunch of good works, right?
Yeah.
Am I more concerned about making everything about Jesus than I am trying to live this moral or whatever life?
Yeah. I think one way I've had it put to me that's been helpful is like, what questions are you asking yourself? Everybody's asking themselves questions. You know, like everybody is asking themselves a question. Most people are asking them questions like, well, how can I get the most out of this day for myself? Or what's going to make me feel the best? What's going to make me make the most money? What's going to give me the most influence? How can I get them to like me? You know, that's not the questions that people that are in close relationship with the Lord are asking. People that are in close relationship with the Lord are asking these questions. How do I hold fast today? You know, how do we're going to talk about this tomorrow, Wednesday night. And one of the things is just like, how do you live your Christian life? You know, one of the first things that I think you do is you admit that you're weak.
Yeah.
You would just admit, and that's the first thing you do is be able to recognize the fact that you can't do it, right? That's something the world never says, right? The world is constantly preaching to you and to me and to everybody, you can do it.
Yeah.
You know, read this book and you can become a millionaire. You know, are you having relationship problems? Read this book. Take this personality test and you can learn everything about everybody. You know, do these things and you can figure it out. And Christ is consistently reminding us like, no, you cannot. You know, you could do everything that book says. It may not work for you.
Yeah.
Because you're not in control. It's not about you. And I think that's been helpful for me just to remind myself like, hey, if my first reaction to Christ is not, I can't do it. You know, it's not that I think I can do it and I think Jesus will help me. It's like, no, I can't do this unless you do it. I can't love my wife the way I'm supposed to unless you help me at all. I can't love my kids. I can't, you know, be a faithful witness at work. I can't be a faithful witness at school. Whatever it is your, you know, sphere of influence is, it's a healthy place to be able to say, I'm weak and I need Christ to show up. Because if he doesn't, nothing else is going to matter. Yeah. Nothing I accomplish, nothing I get done is going to matter. You end up like Sardis, I think, where you're going, and I've really built a great reputation for myself. And it's like, yeah, and it's killed you. You know, like that's what he's saying to Sardis. Like you spend a lot of time making a reputation for yourself to be something, and it's killing you doing that.
Dang.
So, all right, just the two of us. We did pretty good. Well, I don't want to shut you out. You got anything else?
No.
Okay. Yeah. So, again, we got one more church. That's Church in Laodicea next week. We'll have Gib back with us next week. We're excited to finish this up, and we'll kind of let you guys know where we're going from here. I'm sure we'll take a break during the Christmas season just because we'll be here, there, and everywhere, and all that kind of stuff. And I'm sure if we recorded one, you know, everyone would sit down with their kids and family and make them listen to it at Christmas.
Sure,
but yeah,
sure.
Before we open a present, we have to listen to this. That's
Oh my God, I wouldn't.
You can do it at 4 times the speed. You may not be able to hear it, but it's that's how legalism works, right? Oh, I have to do this. I'm gonna find a way around doing it. Yeah. Well, anyway, we're so glad you guys have joined us. As always, Bible study 9:15 Sunday morning here at Pleasant Hill. Worship at 10:30. We'd love for you to join us. Just excited about what God's doing here. I know, we want to be like this church. I think we want to be able to say that we're not able to accomplish anything without Christ doing it, and we don't want to. We really don't want to be about programming and where we should meet and how we should meet and how it should go down. All those questions are questions that have to be answered, but the first question we ask ourselves is, do we really think we can do this without Him? I think that's a good first question. So I pray that we would ask that question as a church and that we would ask that question individually. And man, as always, thank you so much for joining us, for listening, and let us know if you have any questions about Laodicea you want us to hit on next week. And if not, we will hopefully see you tomorrow night at 5:30. If not, we'll see you Sunday. And if not, then we will talk to you next week.